FIA's hard stance in porpoising, bad news for Mercedes. The FIA recently announced to take secure measures to reduce the ever-worrying porpoising issue facing F1 teams. The motorsport body announced that they'll introduce measures to reduce the bouncing phenomenon. However, this could be bad news for the teams that are affected the most by the problem, especially Mercedes. Heading into the Canadian GP and only fresh out of the race in Baku, Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes driver, complained of a cold back and left the race complaining of a hurting back, obviously caused by the bouncing of his car on the straights. If you're new to F1, you should know that the porpoising issue only started this season with the new aerodynamic rules made by the FIA. With 8 races into the new season, the FIA took clear notes on the effects of race cars bouncing on the straights and offered to step in ahead of the Canadian GP and promote the safety of drivers if possible, eliminating porpoising altogether. What then is the FIA's great plan to reduce this problem? The governing body will introduce a metric that follows the car's vertical acceleration to give a quantitative limit against the acceptable levels of the bouncing. The FIA also will increase the strict examination of planks and skids under cars, both in terms of their design and wear, and this could be bad news for teams who experience bouncing the most, especially Mercedes and Ferrari. While it seems Ferrari have somehow managed to find a balance, Mercedes still suffer a lot from the bouncing, most notably on the straights. With the new regulations, the Mercedes cars will no longer be run in a way that they bounce severely, but this could inadvertently reduce the speed of the car. However, the likes of Red Bull, who are yet to suffer badly with porpoising, can continue to run their cars without dramatic change. The simplest solution to reduce the effects of porpoising is to increase the ride height of the car. This makes the car farther from the ground where it cannot be sucked so close by downforce. The FIA have already made clear that they plan to examine undercar planks and skids in search of wear generated by bouncing on the tarmac at high speeds. Increasing the ride height will have a direct impact on the ground effect of the F1 cars, resulting in less downforce, less grip, and slower lap times. Therefore, teams have been running their cars as low to the ground as possible. While it sounds good at least, the exact measures the FIA will implement to tackle porpoising are not yet known, so it remains possible that Mercedes might suffer. The FIA noted that drivers could be disqualified from the Canadian Grand Prix should their teams fail to comply with the FIA's new plan to tackle porpoising in Formula One under a new technical directive. The body said it'll enact long-term measures to reduce or eliminate porpoising. But for now, the governing body will demand that teams ensure their cars are safe and running without any extreme bouncing. These bouncing problems can cause drivers to become distracted and unable to concentrate at high speed, which the FIA says is reason enough to view porpoising as a serious safety concern. For the Canadian Grand Prix, the teams will have to pass a unique technical inspection geared at preventing porpoising. Should the FIA find that a car is oscillating too hard or too often, the ride height of the car must be adjusted. Without doing so, the car will not pass the inspection and could be disqualified. And following Article 10.2 of the International Sporting Code, stewards may disqualify a car considered to be dangerous. The FIA chose to start monitoring the bouncing of cars using an aerodynamic oscillation metric, which is calculated by noting the accelerometers that are already fitted to F1 cars. These accelerometers can measure, among other things, vertical oscillations, that is, bouncing. The FIA will then view the data and determine whether a car is bouncing too severely or too often, and therefore whether it is safe to go racing. Using the data collected by the accelerometers, the FIA will draw up an AOM matrix to determine a prescribed parameter. Teams must calculate the AOM for their car based on 3 laps in the practice sessions without using DRS. Once the car's AOM has been determined, set-up decisions such as ride height, vertical stiffness, and aerodynamic configurations will be locked in place for the remainder of the weekend. There are some exceptions, however, including the raising of a car's ride height, altering tyre pressures, and adjusting front wing flaps. Should any team wish to change their setup, this can only be done by submitting a new AOM calculation. If the team cannot meet the requirements of the FIA, the ride height must be increased by a minimum of 10mm. The Mercedes drivers have been hit at the forefront of criticism of the problems caused by the aggressive ride, and while they certainly have been making sure their concerns are very public, there's no question that they are real. Perhaps the method employed by the FIA to tackle the problem by limiting how the vertical oscillations can be is not a good outcome for the Mercedes team and could mean more bad news for the performance of the W13. As Baku revealed, Mercedes still has the most severe bouncing of all the cars on the grid, and that's even with compromises made to mitigate the problems caused by the bottom of the car smashing into the ground. Chances are this move from the FIA could force it to compromise the setup and therefore pace even more, while others don't have to. That does tackle the fundamental issue of the effect on the drivers, but it gives Mercedes yet more problems. This obviously doesn't mean the FIA isn't right to go in this direction. That the extent of the problem varies from team to team proves the regulations don't fundamentally mean the drivers have to be exposed to potentially damaging rides, so this is an elegant way to react to it. But while it changes the game for the worst for Mercedes for now, the team's primary objective remains unchanged. It must get its bouncing problems under control. The intervention seems to be the right move now that a firm suggestion seeks to meet the medical advice for drivers and also reduce the health risks of driving. While the Ferraris were porpoising aggressively in the opening races, Carlos Sainz noted that he's experienced some of the worst of the physical effects. So it stands that if there are cars on the grid that need a ride height change because they're oscillating too much, the Ferraris will be among them. If this is so, it could affect the performance of Ferrari, who is challenging for the title. Some experts argue that the move is a brave one to save teams from themselves. Although it sounds incredibly complex to monitor and police, this has been necessary to protect competitors from themselves. Given the choice of lap time or physical discomfort, lap time will always take precedent, even if the long-term physical health implications are unknown. It'll probably have an impact upon the competitive order. It may even increase Red Bull's advantage. If you enjoyed the video, share with your friends and like the video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notifications bell to get more from our channel.